Good evening, Who Dat Nation, and happy Wednesday on a Thursday to our Bayou Blitz family. As always, your Bayou Blitz podcast is flexing its muscle by moving calendar days, and making Thursday our Wednesday this week. But I am Bob Rose. I am one of your Bayou Blitz hosts for this evening. Joining me, as always, is your co-host, my friend Brendan Boylan. Happy Wednesday on a Thursday, Brendan.
Yeah, Wednesday on a Thursday. I like that. That's another little patented, trademarked thing we can try to get thrown on a hat or something. I don't know. It's been a rather quiet week for the Saints, which I guess we're starting to hit that time of year, right? It's post-draft. The free agency wave is definitely calmed down. But we're starting to see some of these new guys in the black and gold for the first time. So that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. But Bob, I hope everything is nice and warm and whatnot up in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, you know what? I'll take it. It's a holiday weekend, Memorial Day weekend. So happy holiday weekend to those, to all of you. I hope you all get at least one extra day off this week. I know Brendan is going to be traveling around the country. There is no holiday for me. I'm going to continue to work and try to churn out content through the Saints News Network. But hopefully we'll be able to catch a little bit of sun and maybe hit a pool or something this weekend. Please, everybody stay safe too, when you're on the roads. But like you said, Brendan, it's definitely the slow point of the year as far as football news cycle. And listen, if you're a fan of an NFL team, you want this to be a slow news cycle. You don't want your team making big news, because 98% of the time, if your team is making news, it's of the bad variety. It's a freak injury in OTAs. It's a contract holdout. It's one of your players causing drama, something like that. So I say let's root for slow news. Challenge your media members to come up with content for you to read. Put it in our laps. And don't have the players make it easy for us, because that's usually a bad thing.
I was going to say, it's not just for football right now, too. Really, any sport that's either deep in the playoffs or in the offseason right now, you don't really want to be in the news. I mean, you talk about the NHL being deep in the playoffs. If you're an eliminated team, you don't want to be in the news about contract disputes or star players being grumpy or unhappy after another early exit in the postseason. The NBA, you don't want to be in Memphis right now, right? Memphis Grizzlies fans know exactly what I'm talking about in terms of not wanting to be in the news right now. So to Bob's point, be happy. There's nothing coming out of Saints camp that is anything to be worried about. I will pose this to you, Bob, and this is how we'll start the night. If there is anything to be worried about or somewhat concerned, there's going to be some people that are going, the Saints have all their draft picks signed except for one. What's going on with Isaiah Foskey? Is that really anything to be worried about at this stage for the fans that may just be grasping at something to make newsworthy?
If you're worried about it, that means that you are grasping for something. Because at this stage, it's a little bit surprising, to have an unsigned draft pick, because of the rookie contracts through the players' union and the NFLPA. Most of these things are already written in stone. We've long since passed the days where you have a first or second round draft pick holding out well into camp. Now, get back to me 2 or 3 weeks from now, and if for some unusual reason Isaiah Foskey still is unsigned, I'll be a little bit concerned then. Because 2 or 3 weeks, that means we're creeping towards June mini camp, which is really, I know OTAs and the voluntary, quote unquote, voluntary workouts that are happening now. You'd like to have all your players available, sure, but you're not really going through. There's no physical contact whatsoever, and you're not really going through anything on the field that a player would be fall way behind if they didn't happen to be there. Once you get into June mini camps, that's really the serious introduction to coaches versus players, the newcomers getting used to the system, everybody getting used to their teammates. So I really want Foskey to be signed by then for sure, and I think he will be. I'm not overly concerned. It's a little bit unusual to have an unsigned draft pick at this stage. Most teams have all their picks already signed, or similar situation to the Saints. They're only waiting on like one guy to sign. And usually in this kind of situation, it's coming down to, it's going to be a 4-year deal that's guaranteed for rookies. The only sticking point is usually either guaranteed money or incentives and bonuses that are written into the contract. That's the only thing that's going to be the sticking point at this stage. And I guarantee you, I'd be surprised if Foskey wasn't signed within a week, within a handful of days.
To your point, OTAs. Yeah, it's nice to get everybody out there. It's nice to kind of get the gang back together and introduce some new faces. But guys are only wearing brain buckets. And even then, the brain buckets have padding on them. It is, it's the padding is there just in case they may bump heads with the air. There is no physical contact. No shoulder pads. Like I said, nothing outside of the helmets. And even then, you have guys that are kind of like what you alluded to, either rehabbing from injury or just there to be there, but not really participating in anything. So you could probably easily say 30% of the guys that are even there don't even have a helmet on because they're doing on-field rehab or just stretching or going kind of through walkthroughs, which that's all OTAs are anyway. But nonetheless, it's good to see some Saints out there. If you follow Saints social media, if you follow any of the wonderful guys that do work with the Saints News Network that are down there right now in John and Ross, you've seen snapshots, you've seen video of Derek Carr. You've seen the same for Jamal Williams. And we've also seen a new number being flashed for Shaheed in 22. That's going to be weird.
It is
a little bit. Even though Mark didn't have it all this time, but between Mark and then Chauncey, it's a little weird. It's a little weird. He'll have to make it unweird, right? You have to make enough plays to make it, oh, okay, there's 22. You also got to see some interviews with Derek Carr, who said a couple interesting things, Bob. And I know everybody gets so excited when you have a new piece to the puzzle for New Orleans. This finally feels like the replacement to Drew Brees, the successor. And Derek had a couple nice things to say about New Orleans, and we'll get to that. But he had a lot of great things to say about Chris Olave as well early on. You don't want to get too ahead of yourself because, again, it is just OTAs. But what do you make of Derek Carr already singing high praises of the Saints' first-round pick from a year ago?
Oh, I think it's great. I mean, you want your quarterback to have terrific relationships, instant relationships, with all your receivers, of course. But to have it with the Saints' top receiver, and I know Michael Thomas is still there, and if he's healthy, he'll certainly have a say so, in things. But Olave was hands down the Saints' leading target, their biggest threat as a pass catcher last year. So you want your new quarterback to get up to speed with all the receivers very quickly, but especially your best weapon. And it's hard. I'd be excited if I was a quarterback, throwing to the likes of Olave, Michael Thomas, Juwan Johnson, etc. Because Olave is a terrific route runner. Yeah, and the one thing that we know about Derek Carr is that he can make all the throws, and he will make all the throws during the course of a game. So when you have a receiver that can run a full route tree with the abilities that Chris Olave has, to have your quarterback excited to work with that kind of potential, it's a no-brainer. But B, we already know that these guys have been putting in a little bit extra work, whatever is allowed, past the walkthrough sessions. That's exactly the kind of thing that I want to see from my quarterback. You and I had Jim Everett on, very shortly after the signing of Derek Carr, and Jim alluded to that. We asked Jim, hey, what's the first thing that you need to do, when you're a quarterback and arrive at a new franchise? He said, the first thing I got to do is grab the playbook. And while I'm going through that playbook, I'm on the phone to all my receivers, setting up extra workout dates, because I want to get in workouts with them, as much as possible, because that's how a quarterback and a receiver get on the same page as far as hot reads, instinctive adjustments, that kind of thing. So it's a great thing to see early on.
Well, now I want to go to some of the things Derek said about the city of New Orleans and how welcoming New Orleans has been to not just him, his family, his children. He told a story about having guys come in and out of the house as they've been moving and setting things up, and just taking 5 minutes to talk to these guys and talk about what makes New Orleans special. And the guys just being really excited for Derek to be there. He's talked about taking his kids out, and so many people have offered to buy their kids ice cream or get their kids sweets. He's had to start turning people away because the kids are having, I guess, too many sugar rushes. But he spoke so highly of his time so far in New Orleans. He even alluded to growing up in Houston. And some of the younger years he spent in Houston and missing some of that Southern hospitality. He said it's not quite the same out in Oakland or out in Las Vegas, where he began his NFL career. We've talked to Jim about it too. And Jim joked that LA and Vegas are different places, and Vegas isn't the West Coast, but talking about that change in the middle of your career, going from not just one team to another, but one environment, one type of city culture to a completely new one. And Jim still speaks so highly of the Houdat Nation. Are you happy to see that Derek Carr is already settling in and is being embraced by the city the way he is? Because he's got big shoes to fill with Drew.
I apologize, Brendan. We both got the dreaded circle of weight. So I don't know whether you froze for our viewers too, but you cut out on me at the part where where Jim talked about the adjustment from LA, Vegas, and into a place like New Orleans.
Yeah, and I was just asking for you. I mean, nobody's surprised by that, right? If you've been to New Orleans once in your life, you know exactly the type of hospitality that Derek Carr's talking about. But are you happy and excited to see the fan base embrace him the way that they are? Because at the end of the day, Drew Brees, even though we've had some quarterbacks in between, those are huge shoes to fill.
Yeah.
And not just on the field, but his presence off the field and what he meant to the city of New Orleans, what he meant to the people, the community outreach. I mean, him and Brittany have done such great things in the city of New Orleans. Those are huge shoes to fill as the starting quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. I think there's a lot of pressure there, but Derek's already seeing a lot of love from the community. Do you think that's a comforting thing? Are you happy to see that for Derek? And what type of morale boost is it when you come to a new franchise and you experience that right out the gate?
Oh, it's got to be a huge morale boost. Because you're not only talking about Derek Carr himself uprooting his life, and going to a completely new city, new environment, new area of the country, but uprooting his family too. If you're a family person, then you realize how difficult that is, because again, you're not only making the change yourself, but the fact that your entire family has to do it, you all go through different adjustment periods, yet you all feel what the other is going through when they're going through their own individual adjustments. And then you factor that in with the gigantic, the humongous shoes, that Derek Carr is going to have to fill in the presence of Drew Brees, not only on the field but off the field as well. And Derek certainly has to feel that pressure. He wouldn't be human if he doesn't. To get the proverbial pats on the back, the consistent pats on the back and encouragement that he's been getting from this Saints fan base. It's got to make both him and his family, breathe a little bit easier. Because it's human nature to wonder, hey, are we making the right decision? Not only for Derek professionally, but for all of them personally. Is this a good area? Are our kids going to feel at home? Are we going to feel at home? Are we going to feel welcome? Are we going to feel safe? Do we want to build our life here? Those are major questions to answer, and the fact that the community is welcoming them in such a resounding way, it takes a huge piece of the puzzle off that plate, for Derek Carr to deal with, where he can concentrate a little bit more on football. And we've heard countless Saints players that have come from other franchises before echo that same thing. We've heard Jameis Winston say it. You talked about Jim. Jim echoed those sentiments. Clear back in the mid '90s. If you've read Sean Payton or Drew Brees' book, they talk on and on and on. And remember, those two came here immediately following during the Hurricane Katrina rebuild. So that on top of everything else, it was an area that was beset by tragedy and a region that was absolutely devastated. And yet, the first thing that both Drew and Sean said in their books and publicly at the time, was they didn't mince words. They had doubts, they had reservations for a number of different reasons, but the community helped them feel welcome, really gave them support. New Orleans and the Gulf Coast region as a whole, really, they are a very welcoming atmosphere. Yeah, I know the inner city has crime issues and things like that, like many inner cities do, but it's one thing to feel that hospitality when you're just an average person like you or I, Brendan, or we can call ourselves minor celebrities. We have a show. But I mean, if you're just an average person like you or I, and when we feel it, that's great enough in and of itself. When you're a person with as much on the plate as Derek Carr has, and as much at stake in his life as Derek Carr has, to feel that kind of encouragement, to feel that kind of support, has got to cause him and his whole family to breathe a huge sigh of relief.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think the one thing about the city of New Orleans, right? Drew said it best, and said it to Zion Williamson when he was drafted to the Pelicans, is if you love New Orleans, New Orleans will love you back. And I think that Derek Carr and the Carr family is already starting to see that firsthand, and that's a really magical thing. Going from one Saints quarterback to another, Jake Haener in the news this week, not for the wrong reasons by any means, but Panini did their rookie premiere photo shoot. This is for the guy's first official sports cards as members of the teams that selected them in their jerseys for the first time. And Jake Haener made some news because it felt less like a rookie photo shoot for a starting quarterback or backup quarterback in the league, and more like a photo shoot for I might be dating myself here, but In Sync or the Backstreet Boys. It felt very boy bandish. But listen, props to Jake Haener for making fun out of an event that, while I'm sure it's a little fun, that's got to be a long day. Between going through all the guys that get invited, take your individual photos, take your group photos. Here's a stack of whatever to sign. Here's a stack of this. We need you to wear this jersey for approximately 5 seconds so we can take it, cut it up, put it in cards, and here's another one. It's got to be a long day, and he certainly made some fun out of it. I know we've talked a little bit about Haener, his relationship with Derek Carr, and the Fresno State connection, but your immediate thoughts on seeing a guy who looked like he was doing a photo shoot for Abercrombie and Finch, or like, what was going on?
Man, I won't lie. When I first saw the photos after they'd been leaked, I honestly thought they'd been photoshopped. And once I realized it wasn't, I did get a laugh out of it. I mean, what a goof. But you like to see your players have a laid back approach to things like that, because like you said, that's got to be a pain in the ass for these players to go through. It's a big honor, being in the NFL at all, let alone getting your picture on a football card. I mean, that's every boy's dream, right? But when you go from a little boy wanting to be on a football card, and then you have your dreams realized by just getting to the NFL in the first place, then reality is a huge smack in the face when you're told, hey, you got to be at this event, you got to do this, you got to wear that, you got to do this pose, and they basically have you tied up for the entire day. Meanwhile, you're a rookie quarterback trying to digest a brand new playbook, in a new environment as quickly as you can. You have coaches in both ears. You have teammates in your face. You got to learn this. You got to pick this up. We do this. We do this. We do this. So your brain is literally racing 1,000 miles an hour, and then you have to do something like that. So good for him for having the sense of humor and putting a little bit of a twist of fun on it. These are cards that are gonna live in infamy. As he's a veteran player. New rookies, new teammates are going to be constantly making fun of him, and he had to realize that. But just to do what he did shows you that he has a good sense of humor. And it's going to be it's always a tough rookie year for any player. Because of the adjustment period, and it's good that he can make light of some situations.
I was going to say, out of all the cards that get produced nowadays, I certainly hope one, doesn't have to be 2, 3, doesn't have to be all of them. Give me one card of his that has one of those goofy poses, not just a normal pose. You remember the cards back in, I guess it would have been like the 90s. It was like Pro Set used to do them, and they were really goofy photos. For the NFL. I think Upper Deck did a couple years with baseball, where these guys just looked ridiculous. Can we get some of those back? Like, just fun, goofy looking cards. Can we get the sponsorships back? Like, remember McDonald's did, cards for a while. Dunkin' Donuts did some in the 90s for basketball, because that makes sense, and you could go on and on and on about the goofiness of these things. They're fun. They're not supposed to be super serious. They're supposed to be fun little cards. So yeah, please give me a Jake Haener rookie card of him looking in the camera going, that's it's funny that that's the news of this week for New Orleans and the Saints. But nonetheless, it was. I mean, it wasn't just local. I mean, ESPN had posted some stuff about it. The NFL networks had posted some stuff about it, but that's, like you said, that's what you want to see out of some of these guys, and have personalities. I mean, look at a guy like Cameron Jordan, who is always one of the biggest personalities in the locker room, but following one of the days at OTAs, he walked upstairs and started making sales calls for the sales team, trying to sell tickets. I mean, could you imagine being someone in New Orleans who's on their call list, and you pick up the phone, you're like, hello? Hey, this is Cameron Jordan, defensive end for the New Orleans Saints, just trying to convince you to buy some tickets to watch me play football. You're like, yeah, okay, whatever. Hangs up. Oh, that was actually...
How are you going to say no to Cam Jordan? I mean, some telemarketers are difficult to say no to as it is. I don't know how I'm going to say no to the immortal Cam Jordan if he calls me up and says and gives me a sales pitch. I don't know. I can't see myself doing it.
The ticket prices might. Let's be honest, Bob. True. You and I both know how expensive it is when you're not credentialed and going to the games yourself, which you have now. Trying to get in the building just for fun is not a cheap experience anymore.
No,
whatsoever. And that's a whole nother podcast topic because the NFL, out of all the major leagues in the United States, continues. Yes, they're the king, and that's why Sunday tickets as expensive as it is. Even making the switch to YouTube TV, I was flabbergasted how expensive it is for Sunday ticket this year. But it's also the reason why, if you, me, Katie, and Lauren wanted to meet up at a game this year, and just go to the game, a preseason game or something, whatever, we couldn't all get in the door for less than $100 a piece. And that's the cheaper stadiums in the country. That's not even going to New Orleans is a whole different ball game. Even going to Charlotte now, going to see the Panthers play isn't as cheap as it used to be. But yeah, NFL, isn't that fun? They still know how to make the money. Well, let's jump to this, Bob. OTAs obviously underway. There are some guys that are missing from OTAs. We just said it's not really a big deal that these guys are missing whatsoever from the OTAs, but there have been a few names that have actually made their way back, whether they've been full participants or on the side. What is a name that you've seen be at least present at OTAs that gets you excited, whether they're coming off of an injury, whether it's a new face? What's a name or two that's got you excited that you've seen at OTAs?
You got to start with Michael Thomas. Mike isn't going to do very much field work. Really next to no field work, probably before training camp. But in the last couple years, there have been rumors, many of them false, but there's been a little bit of smoke there, or a little bit of fire to that smoke. That there was a little bit of a disconnect between Mike Thomas and either coaches or management. This is a big year for Thomas, and the New Orleans Saints need a healthy Michael Thomas. A Michael Thomas is going to play with a chip on his shoulder, and I think that's what they're going to get. But I expect to see a very motivated Mike Thomas this year. He's playing for a new contract, be it somewhere else or be it continuing his career in New Orleans. So the fact that he's just around right now is a good sign to me. And really, in the general scale, the Saints were only missing 10 or 11 players that weren't there at the start of OTAs. That's a very good percentage, especially when you consider that really this team's entire defensive coaching staff outside of the head man Dennis Allen is going to be brand new. So even though there's very little, there's no significant on-field work going on, there's still film studies, coaches meetings, things like that. So even the players that aren't participating, that are rehabbing injuries, post-surgical stuff, minor things like that, the fact that they're there and can communicate with these coaches, and it gets everybody on the same page quicker. But if you're going to ask me an individual player that I'm excited about his mere presence, it's going to be Mike Thomas.
I'm going to go a little bit of a different direction. A guy that was a camp superstar last year in Smoke Monday. We talked a little bit about Smoke and how he probably has an uphill battle, considering how deep New Orleans is at safety, at least on paper, after some of their signings this offseason. And not that they're the deepest team in the league at that position or anything, but there's a lot of veterans that are going to be competing for the same position that he is.
Mm-hmm.
But Smoke turned some heads early. He's a guy that is a big physical presence. And a guy that could be a tone setter, if you will. I also think he has the athleticism to make a difference on special teams. I'm just happy to see that he's healthy and he's going to get his fair chance to crack the roster. He might not, but there are guys like that you just want to see at least get a shot at it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited for Smoke. DeMarco Jackson is a guy we've talked about a lot as well. Going to be competing for that base 4-3 starting linebacker job and playing kind of that Caden Ellis role. We've kind of made that comparison a few times, whether it's going to be him or Zach Bond. But to see DeMarco get out there as well is going to be a lot of fun. And I know those guys are both nursing injuries or rehabbing from injuries, and they're going to take it slow.
Mhm.
And we might not see any real action for those guys until maybe even training camp. But I'm really excited to see what those young guys can do. Hoodie says he has a question for Bob. Bob,
Let's go away.
yeah, fire away. We are here for you guys. Obviously, a little bit of a slower week. We still have plenty to talk about, speculate on. But if you guys have anything for us, please throw it in the comments. Obviously, we changed the day of the show. We flexed our muscles a little bit, so didn't get the tweets out that we usually do about what you guys want us to talk about or drop us some questions and whatnot. So yeah, do fire away, Bob. When you're looking at OTAs for New Orleans and some of the other teams out there, I think one thing that always gets highlighted is new quarterbacks. You look at a team like Tampa Bay that has had plenty of content put out with their quarterbacks. We've seen some Derek Carr, seen some Jameis Winston. Is this a team in New Orleans that you should be excited about the comp? Not that it's a true competition, right? I don't want anybody twisting my words here. I'm not saying there's a controversy in New Orleans. Are you more satisfied going into the season at this point this year than you were this point last year in terms of the guys you have in the quarterback room, or is it about the same?
I'm going to say I'm more confident in the quarterback room as a whole, this year, and I want to be very careful when I say that because I'm a Jameis Winston fan, but myself, like a lot of other people, they had reservations about how Winston's style of play was going to translate into Pete Carmichael's offensive system. And I'm also one of the people that don't believe that Jameis got a real fair shake as the New Orleans Saints starting quarterback, but that's neither here nor there. He's not the starter. Derek Carr was brought in to be the starter, but yeah, and that's the reason why I am more confident in the Saints quarterback room as a whole, because Carr, based off what we've seen in his career, compared to what we've seen in Jameis Winston's career, I think Derek Carr is more physically suited to run Pete Carmichael's system, the system that we saw Drew Brees run for so many years. I think that fits Carr's style of play a little bit more than it fits Jameis Winston's style of play. So it's for that reason that I'm a little bit more excited about Derek Carr, because I think he fits the system a little bit better, at least based off what we've seen. Then you have Winston, who I believe is already the best backup quarterback in the National Football League. I can't think of a number 2 quarterback off the top of my head that I would take over Jameis Winston if I had to start a backup quarterback for either a single game or a longer stretch of time. And then you factor in Jay Kaner, a guy who I loved his collegiate film, loved him at Fresno State when the little chance I got to see him live, and the skill set that he brings to the table, and again very comparable to Derek Carr, in that his physical abilities seem almost tailor made for the type of offense that we saw Drew Brees run for so many years. So when you factor in all 3 of those guys, and by the way, that Taysom Hill guy. That's going to take
Is
some.
he quarterback?
What's that?
Is he really a quarterback though?
Taysom, no,
Taysom Hill?
No, but he's going to take snaps out of the backfield. He's going to throw passes. And in an emergency situation, if something knock on wood, if something disastrous happened to all your quarterbacks during the course of a game, I feel confident that that you could move Taysom Hill back there, and just say Taysom, do Taysom stuff, and you might be able to pull out that particular game. So for that reason, I consider Taysom Hill, as kind of a part of the quarterback room.
They used to call Cordell Store Slash.
Yeah.
I think Taysom Hill is an extension of that idea, to the nth degree. Like, it's a whole new place. or that guy is a part of the quarterback room, a part of the running back room, a part of the receiver room. Essentially, any offensive meeting that happens, Taysom Hill needs to just clone himself and be in. Or he needs to be on a Zoom call with every single positional group offensively. Let's go back to Hoodie's question for Bob. We talked about this a little bit last week. This is fun. How many wide receivers will the Saints keep on the 53-man roster, knowing injuries from the past? Also, who would those receivers be for you if you had to predict? We kind of talked about that last week because Bob called me out because the guys that I had would have had A.T. Perry being the 6th receiver that the Saints keep. So, Bob, opening the door to this conversation again, super early.
Yeah.
Super early. You never know what's going to happen in OTAs, mini camp, training camp. Guys can be cut before training camp. But how many receivers will the Saints keep?
And Hoodie, that is a great question. For the last few years, we've seen the New Orleans Saints keep 6 wide receivers on their active roster into the regular season. But that's come with a caveat. The reason they've kept 6 is because one of their receivers was a designated return specialist. First it was Deontay Harris. And then last year it was when Deontay got hurt, they promoted Rashid Shaheed from the practice squad. Now Shaheed turned out to be a very, very good wide receiver, basically shocking the world. But the Saints didn't know that necessarily right away. They promoted Shaheed as a return specialist. If the Saints keep 6 receivers, and I believe that they will, if the Saints keep 6 receivers, it's going to be on the condition that one of those guys develop into a return guy. Yeah, it could be Shaheed, but you want to be careful with that. Because Rashid, they want Rashid to be a big part of the offense, not necessarily the number 2 receiver like he was because of injury last year, but a 3-4 guy that's going to get 15 to 20 snaps a game. So you want to be careful. We saw he's a little bit bigger than Deontay was, but we saw Deontay start to have some injury problems and not be as effective as a returner when he got more offensive playing time. So if you believe that to be true, then maybe a guy like Malik Flowers, who comes in as an undrafted rookie, but he has 7 collegiate kick returns, 4 touchdowns, tying an NCAA record with Rashid Shaheed. So Malik Flowers, has to be the early favorite to grab that return specialist spot. If it's not him, then it'll probably fall back to Shaheed by default, unless they unearth another guy in training camp. And then you look at the depth chart. Olave and Mike Thomas, they're your top 2 receivers. We talked about Shaheed. He's going to have a spot. So that's 3 spots right there. You can't get – I love A.T. Perry. I loved him pre-draft, loved him all 3 nights of the draft, and I love the fact that they drafted him. But A.T. Perry's a 6th-round pick. You can't guarantee a roster spot for a 6th-round pick. And ignore. He had a couple drops in today's pitch and catch sessions. If those continue, that'll obviously be a concern. But it's one questionable day. I expect he'll bounce back. But you look at this depth chart beyond Mike Thomas, Chris Olave, and Rashid Shaheed. Traquan Smith. And it pains me to say this, Traquan Smith has a lot of experience in this system. So it's his job to lose. But the Saints brought in James Washington. The Saints brought in Brian Edwards. Both of those guys are experienced NFL veterans who have started at previous stops in their career. And if you're going to give Traquan a slight edge because of his experience in the Saints system, you got to give Brian Edwards a little bit of an edge because of his experience playing with Derek Carr. We've seen this Saints offense struggle when Mike Thomas has been sidelined for 40 of the last 50 games. Even with Olave and Shaheed playing so well, neither one of those players added the big physical presence that a Michael Thomas can. Traquan Smith has that size, has never shown that ability. Maybe a guy like Brian Edwards, a big physical target. Maybe it's A.T. Perry, Shaq Davis, another undrafted rookie. He might have an opportunity. And we know that the Saints have had a lot of success with undrafted wideouts in the past. So there's going to be a lot of competition for spots 4 through 6. I'm going to say 4 and 5. Because Malik Flowers is going to have a chance to win that return specialist job if they keep 6 guys. Personally, my money is on. I've been an A.T. Perry guy from the start. I think he's going to have a strong training camp, and I think he's going to show why, make other teams regret passing on him in the draft, and he's going to show why yours truly was so high coming on him. So if I had to make my early prediction, I would say that the Saints do keep 6, and it's going to be Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, Rashid Shaheed, A.T. Perry, Brian Edwards, and Malik Flowers. So if I get my way, I am finally done talking about Trash Quan Smith on this roster.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves now. I think he's going to be a guy that just sticks, and it's going to be the experience play.
And it's big. Like I said before, it's his job to lose, whether we like it or not.
It absolutely is. You're absolutely right. I think the one thing when it comes to the wide receiver position, and I kind of alluded to this when we talked about it last week, is I do have a feeling that Derek Carr is going to have a say in who stays if there are guys on the bubble. And the fact that you have a guy like Edwards, who he's played with before, already has some chemistry with, I think that plays in Edwards' favor really well too. And that goes into that, Traquan Smith kind of position at wide receiver 4. So it's going to be something interesting to watch. I don't know how many they're going to keep. I really don't. I'd like to think it's 6. I think Rashid Shaheed's going to be the one interesting one to watch. He's going to have a roster spot. I'm not saying he's not. But how are the Saints going to view Shaheed? Are they going to view him as a number 3 receiver, or are they going to view him as a return specialist with some receiver upside? Because that's 2 completely different ways
It is
of looking, evaluating, and then building a roster around that. You were very high on him being like a true receiver, especially with the flashes he showed last year. I'm more someone who's going, you know what? He's such a dynamic returner. You don't want to risk him getting hurt. We're on different pages of the book there, but just like the Saints coaching staff's going to be on some of that as well.
Yeah, and listen, I can just picture. I've been an assistant coach in my career, and when you have a guy, that can contribute in multiple ways, like a Rashid Shaheed can, I can picture assistant is maybe even a little bit of strife between assistant coaches. Because if you're the special teams coach, I want that guy returning kickoffs. I want that guy returning punts. If you're the offensive coordinator, I want that guy as my number 3 receiver because we all saw what big play potential that Shaheed had showed. I was pleasantly surprised at how good a route runner he developed into down the stretch of the season. And over the last 6 games, Shaheed had more catches than anybody on the Saints roster, and that includes Olave, Jawan Johnson, and Alvin Kamara. So Shaheed showed that he can be a go-to weapon. So I'm with you. I'm very interested in how they're going to decide to use Shaheed. Malik Flowers could make that decision easy by just being an explosive return guy that causes them to say, you know what, we feel comfortable with Flowers or whomever. We feel comfortable with this guy returning kicks enough where we're going to use Shaheed a lot more on offense, and we're not going to worry about his special teams value until we need it.
Special teams guys will forever have a spot in the league, whether it's a return guy, whether it's just a great special teams tackler. I was told that at a young age playing football. If you get really good at one thing, get really good at special teams, because you will find your way onto a college roster and potentially a pro roster. And it's a good problem to have. I mean, we could go back, and do I want to be this mean? Is it mean or is it truthful? I'm thinking, yeah, we remember the good returners that the Saints have had over the years. We remember Darren Sproles, Hardy, obviously was a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro selection. Shaheed showed moments. But then you go back to the years where they had just terrible return men. And like Marcus Murphy, who did return one for a touchdown.
Yes, he did.
In Carolina. But not a breakaway speed type of guy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like could get you a solid 10, 15 yards per return, but was not going to blow you away with anything. And I'm sure I'm forgetting others, and that's how bad they were. But we get so wrapped up in the Reggie Bush was a great returner. The Deontay Hardy was a great returner. Courtney Roby was a great returner. That it's almost this luxury that you forget that you have until it's on and you forget, oh man, what we would do to have a great return man. And, Deontay Harris, Hardy really filled a need because those years for the Saints prior to him being there were some of those years of like, who's our return man?
Yeah, and they even had to use Taysom Hill on kickoff returns and Alvin Kamara on punt and kickoff returns, and believe me, and Kamara did the job well, but that's definitely not a player you want to see on special teams.
Right. And John Butler just threw in the comments, Michael Lewis, a friend of ours. And Michael Lewis, a friend of ours, and Tyrone Hughes, both legends that were great return men.
Yeah, I mean those two are in this New Orleans Saints Hall of Fame specifically because of their kick and punt return abilities.
Like I said, get good at one thing. It's special teams. For all you kids watching, I don't care that you're the star quarterback. I don't care that you're the number one receiver. Get good at special teams.
Yeah,
from a young age. Hoodie also asked a follow-up. You think James Washington or any other receiver could finally send a guy like Traquan or Kirkwood home and off the team? You kind of answered that. Don't diss on my boy Keith. Like, geez.
I like Keith. I root for Keith, and he's had some moments, but I think Keith Kirkwood, and you've said it yourself, Brendan. Keith Kirkwood's career looks like it's going to be a guy that's just going to bounce back and forth between the back end of a roster and practice squad. Hey, listen, that's more of an NFL career than the most human beings ever get. I'm hoping that an A.T. Perry or a James Washington or a Brian Edwards can supplant Traquan Smith from the roster. I know I talk about Traquan like he's wronged me personally, but I almost feel that way. Traquan adds so little to this roster. Don't give me bullshit that he's a good blocker. What are wide receivers paid to do? Get open, get separation, catch the damn ball, and get yards. And those are four things that Traquan Smith has not been able to ever do consistently. James Washington, if you're going to talk about blocking wide receivers, James Washington is a pretty good one too. I think that if he or Brian Edwards can gain the confidence of Derek Carr, and that's going to be key. And you said it a minute ago. If Edwards or Washington can gain the confidence of Derek Carr over Traquan Smith, then all of a sudden you're talking about Traquan. Literally, we've put him on the roster bubble every single year. Yet, I don't think the Saints coaches ever really entertained the idea of releasing him. That could change real quick this summer.
Mm-hmm. Real quick on Keith Kirkwood. Other part of that is he's played for 2 NFL teams, and there are not a lot of guys that can prolong careers and be a part of 2 teams. So just shout out Keith, Neptune Township. Before we get gone, and we talked about it before the show, getting off the air at 10 o'clock tonight Eastern was a goal, just because Bob alluded to it. I'm traveling. I got to be up and on the road extremely early in the morning. What did you call it? You called it this when I was traveling out across the country. You called it the my world tour.
Yeah,
So
something like that.
we're back on Brendan's world tour. It's not that far. It's Fayetteville, North Carolina. It's not that far. It's like 2.5 hours, but it's an early morning. To all you hip hop fans, I will say hello to J. Cole if I see him, just for you guys. I probably actually will swing by the childhood home on Forest Hills just because. But I do want to ask you about this, all seriousness, about the NFL. Is the emergency third quarterback is back? NFL teams had the ability from 1991 to 2010 to have a third quarterback on the roster that did not count among the players active, but was able to play if a team lost its top two quarterbacks in the game due to injury. Bob, what are your thoughts on that, one? And then two, for whatever reason, does that help the development of a young guy like Jake Haener, knowing that he's going to put shoulder pads on, he's going to put a helmet on game day, whether or not he actually gets to see the field or not?
I'll cover that part first. Yeah, I think it's a tremendous asset to the development of a rookie quarterback. Because it gets you into a game situation, even if you just are on the sidelines. If you allow yourself to get into the game, then it's just that. You get yourself into the flow of the game. You understand the way the coaches think. You understand the way, Derek Carr, Jameis Winston, the guys ahead of you on the depth chart. You understand what they think, and things unravel. Can unravel so fast during the course of a game. So you are there to physically feel the momentum shifts and how your teammates are going to handle changes in momentum and pressure situations. So yeah, I think that's absolutely crucial. And I do like, and I so rarely say this about the Nazi Roger Goodell regime, but I love the fact that they brought this back. I don't, make no mistake, I don't think they would have brought it back had it not affected a playoff game like it did with the San Francisco 49ers against the Philadelphia Eagles. But the fact that it did, it doesn't hurt anything. And it's not like the Saints would be able to use a Jake Haener in a way that they would have used Taysom Hill back in 2017 or 2018. List him as the emergency quarterback, but then throw him out in multiple positions. You're not going to see that from a Jake Haener, and that's not why they brought the rule back. If teams start to violate that rule, not violate, but bend that rule a little bit in that way, then you're going to see an alteration of it. You're going to see teams forcing to declare certain players. And I don't think this rule change, this rule re-addition, comes with having to declare a specific player as an emergency quarterback. But there will be certain rules during the game, course of a game, very similar to what we saw before, in that if an emergency quarterback comes into the game, then only one of the other two injured quarterbacks would be able to return if something happened. There are going to be alterations, but it doesn't hurt the flow of the game at all. If anything, it definitely helps.
So the rules, as I understand right now, is this: one, the designated emergency quarterback would not be able to enter or play any snaps unless the two other quarterbacks went down with injury, food poisoning, sickness, what have you. The update on that is, if either of the first two quarterbacks is medically cleared to return to play, they must return to play over the third quarterback in the game. So there's not going to be a situation where two guys get knocked out, your third quarterback comes back, and then medically clear one of the guys that got knocked out, and he's going to sit the bench. If you get medically cleared and you're quarterback one or quarterback two, you have to go back into the game.
That's a little bit different from what it was before. Before, the rule was, if you did lose your first two quarterbacks, and the number three, the emergency QB, had to come in, he had to stay in until at least the fourth quarter, even if one of the other two guys were cleared to return. So that is a little bit different than the previous rule.
I'm not mad with the rule. I do think it helps younger guys because and some people may disagree with me. I think it is completely different being on the sideline in street clothes with a headset, little earpiece, than it is to be fully dressed out, ready to go with a little earpiece and sitting in those conversations on the bench after series after series after series. Just the difference in street clothes to full uniform makes all the mental difference. Knowing that you could be called upon at any point. You're going to prepare sharper. You're going to be sharper. And I think that helps guys, whether it's Jake Haener, whether if you look back when the rule was in play, that would have been Chase Daniels' rookie season 2010, second year, first year, second year, because Chase Daniel was on the Super Bowl team.
Yeah.
So Chase Daniel was only on that Super Bowl roster and was only dressed out for those games because of the third emergency quarterback rule. And you guys might say, well, Brent, that's not a great example. What's Chase Daniel done? Chase Daniel's one of the highest paying backup quarterbacks over the last decade because of the things he got a chance to learn. I look at guys that were, day 2, day 3 draft picks that didn't really pan out for teams that didn't have that experience over the last 12 years that this rule's been, gone. You look at a guy like Ian Book and say, well, what kind of experience would Ian Book have gained if he wasn't a practice squad player half of his rookie year? I know that's a stretch, but I'm just throwing the name out there. And you could throw that with anybody. Well, what if they were able to actually sit there and be active for these games, and what kind of difference would that have made in their mental preparation and this and that? And I think that's going to be an interesting situation and argument moving forward.
I'll tell you, I'm not sure Ian would have had as much of a deer in the headlights look when he was thrown into action against the Dolphins if he was used to the flow on the sidelines week in and week out, because he was an active part of the roster.
Well, in his defense in that game, he wasn't allowed to practice with the team at all that week because of the COVID protocols.
Also true.
I wish that we could actually get a filmed or recorded version of him telling that story, because I've had people tell me that, hey, I got a chance to talk to Ian and he kind of told me the situation and the story. And I said, that's so wild that hasn't been just a documented article, a documented piece on what it was like to be the practice squad quarterback that gets thrown into action on Monday Night Football.
Yeah.
That could not be around his team until you all got to the stadium.
When you had 27 starters or significant role players that were going to be out of action as well.
Yeah, that's one that I don't understand how there hasn't been like a serious piece done on that. Hey, Kyle T, I'm just throwing ideas out here. You guys can grab them up. I'm just throwing it out there. I think it's a quiet time, like Bob and I were saying. Somebody go get in touch with the Eagles PR team and see what could happen. But nonetheless, I wanted to talk about that before we got off the air. It looks like our time is coming to a close. No daughter drop this week. It's OTAs. It's a relaxing time. We got one question about the roster in way too early. That'll do. We'll get some.
Right. You know what? I do want to give you one daughter drop. Everybody knows how to follow me. I hope. Bob Rose on Facebook, at BobbyR2613 on Twitter. At BobbyR2613 on Twitter. Follow us all at Saints News and Saints News Network, and also your Bayou Blitz Facebook page, Facebook group. So we got that out of the way. So instead of wasting time telling you who I am, I'm going to give Brendan his daughter drop for the week, and that is dot or drop. Jake Haener should get more preseason game snaps than Jameis Winston.
Wow. That's a really good one. Because I think hypothetically you'd want to say, no, Jameis should get him.
I give him to Jake.
No, I do too. I think you're on the money with that. I think it's a dot. I think the way it should roll is, we'll see if the Saints actually do it, but you have a quarter for Derek, you have a quarter for Jameis, and you get the second half for Jake. And that's how it should be in the preseason. So yeah. all dotted.
Yeah,
I like
and then
that.
and then even your dress rehearsal. Obviously, Carr is going to come out with your starters, but I wouldn't play Jameis at all. And again, this is no disrespect on Jameis. Jameis has played with most of these guys. He has played under Pete Carmichael's system. Derek Carr, he's obviously going to need the reps. He's your starter. He's your new starter. Jake Haener is your rookie quarterback. That's why I would give him the reps, and let him get his feet wet in a game type situation. I mean, preseason is obviously a lot more laid back, but that's why I do it. Yeah, since we were talking about Haener a little bit tonight, I had to throw that daughter drop at you.
That was a good one. I have to throw one back then just to make it fair. Dot or drop, since we were talking about receivers and how tight it's going to be, dot or drop, the Saints keep at least 2 receivers on the practice squad this year.
That's a dot, definite drop, or definite dot, excuse me, because they always do. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised to see them keep 3, depending on the cuts from other teams. Obviously, they like to keep a veteran, with some game experience on their practice squad, but they love to keep undrafted guys and rookie cast-offs from other teams. That's how they discovered Willie Snead. That's how they got discovered Rashid Shaheed. So even if they keep 6 on the active roster, I still expect them to keep at least 2 wideouts on their practice squad.
I think that's fair. Well, guys, we're keeping it really simple tonight. Just look right there. That's how you follow me. Bob's is in his little corner, wherever it may be. There you go. So we thank you guys all for tuning in. Obviously, follow us on Twitter as well, Bayou Blitz Pod. We'll be back next Wednesday with some more New Orleans Saints news as it continues through what we will call the slow part of the offseason, but we're not slowing down for you guys. Content every single week, podcasts, hour-long podcast every single week talking about everything you guys want to hear. So go on Twitter, check out our upcoming polls. Bob, it's about that time of the year too for a giveaway, but we'll have to have that conversation with the bosses of we are the bosses. Wait,
We are.
what? Whoa, we're gonna have to have that conversation for ourselves. What are we gonna give away this time? Certainly something before the season starts. It's got to be a good one too before the season starts. Real quick, too, Bob is going to be recording with me and Noel Thomas Manning III this weekend for our podcast through Bottom of the Mug Productions. So we're extremely excited to hear a little bit of Bob's backstory, the origin stories of Bob Rose. Right, we got to have. Are you a super villain origin or a superhero? I think we kind of know the answer to that one.
We know the answer to that.
It's the super villain origin story of Bob Rose. We'll have that podcast. We'll share that through the Bayou Blitz pod as well. So until next week, guys, I hope you have a safe and fun Memorial Day weekend. And we'll see you right back here next Wednesday. Until then, find peace, spread love, practice positivity. We'll see you then.